All right. Good afternoon. I know there's a lot of different stuff going on. Just some programming notes for all of you. On Monday, our guest will be Bob Ray, the president of the Economic and Social Council, and our friend Navid Hanif, the assistant secretary general in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. They will be here to brief you on the ECOSOC Forum on Financing for Development. That will take place next week on the 28th and 29th of April. This year's forum, the 10th since the establishment of the follow-up on financing for development under the 2015 Addis Ababa Agenda for Action. We'll look ahead to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which will take place in Sevilla in Spain from June 30th to July 3rd of this year. The 4th conference aims to galvanize commitments to cooperation among all countries for concrete measures and solutions to close a $4 trillion annual funding gap to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The forum will be the last chance for inputs from multiple stakeholders into the FFD4 draft outcome document. That meeting, the forum next week, will take place in the Trusteeship Council. It will be broadcast live by our friends at UN Web TV, and you can contact DESA for more information. Then at 1:45 p.m. on Monday, there'll be a briefing by the chair for the upcoming 3rd session of the Preparatory Committee for the 2026 Review Conference of the Parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. That will take place on the 28th of April to the 4th of May. And following the Security Council meeting in the morning, on Monday morning, there will be our friend Filippo Grandi, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, for refugees, will be at the Security Council stakeout to speak to you. But we'll remind you of that on Monday. Our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, arrived in Rome a short while ago, where tomorrow he will attend the funeral of Pope Francis, St. Peter's Square. He will be back in the office on Monday. There will be a plenary meeting of the General Assembly to pay tribute to the late Pope Francis on Tuesday next week in the General Assembly Hall at 3 p.m. The Secretary General will speak at that event. And as a reminder, the UN flag will fly at half-staff on Tuesday in honor of the late Pontiff. Our Deputy Secretary General will be traveling to Montevideo in Uruguay later today to chair annual regional retreat with UN resident coordinators from across the Latin American and Caribbean region. Ms. Mohammed will also meet with senior government officials to strengthen the UN-Uruguay partnership and discuss priority actions to support the Sustainable Development Goals. She will be back in New York on the 29th of April. This morning, and is still ongoing, the Security Council met to discuss Syria. Briefing was Geir Pedersen, our special envoy for Syria. He told council members that the political transition in Syria is now at a truly critical juncture, adding that in his recent discussions with the interim authorities, including Ahmed al-Shara, he stressed the need for future constitutional process that involves all of Syria's societal and political components. For her part, Joyce Msuya, the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, also spoke to council members. She told them that nearly 3/4 of the population in Syria are in need and 7 million of them are displaced. Since the start of the year, 960 trucks have delivered aid through cross-border operations from Turkey. That's more trucks than in the whole of 2024. However, we need more funding to sustain this work, let alone scale it further, she said. Turning to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, our friends at the World Food Program announced today that they have run out of food stocks in Gaza. That is due to the Israeli ban on entry of supplies of any kind, regardless of how critical those supplies may be. And this ban is now nearing nearly 2 months. Today, the World Food Program delivered the last remaining food stocks to kitchens serving hot meals, so they're now expected to fully run out of food very soon. For weeks, these kitchens have been the only consistent source of food assistance for the people in Gaza. Despite reaching just half of the population with only 25% of daily food needs, they've also so far provided a critical lifeline. As a reminder, all 25 bakeries in Gaza supported by the World Food Program already had to close last month when wheat flour and cooking fuel ran out. WFP says more than 116,000 metric tons of food, or food assistance rather, are enough to feed 1 million people for up to 4 months, is positioned at 8 corridors and is ready to be brought into Gaza by WFP and food security partners as soon as the crossings reopen. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reminds us that the rapid depletion of essentials is also affecting other parts of our humanitarian response, including the health sector, shelter, water, and sanitation. As a result, hunger is spreading in Gaza, malnutrition is deepening in Gaza, and injured people and other patients remain untreated in Gaza, and as we've said before, people are dying. OCHA reiterates that Israel, as the occupying power, has clear obligations under international law, which include ensuring food, medical supplies, public health services are available, and facilitating humanitarian relief when they're not otherwise supplied. Meanwhile, looting of remaining supplies continues, with our partners on the ground reporting that this practice is now less organized and more opportunistic than before the ceasefire, and all those operations are seemingly driven by desperation. Our health colleagues tell us that the medical facilities continue to come under attack, including an Al-Dora hospital for children near Gaza City, which was hit on Tuesday. No one was injured, but the intensive care unit, solar panels, and water tanks on the rooftop were all damaged. Displacement remains a major concern. OCHA has completed an initial analysis of the displacement order issued yesterday by the Israeli forces north of Gaza. The order covers 7.5 square kilometers, which is roughly 2% of the Gaza Strip, and overall about 70% of the Gaza Strip is now under displacement orders or in no-go zones, where Israeli authorities require aid personnel to coordinate any movement. Moving to the West Bank, our OCHA colleagues warn that already unprecedented levels of displacement, with tens of thousands of people displaced this year, already continue to rise. In an update released yesterday, OCHA notes that in just 1 week, that's between the 15th and the 21st of April, Israeli forces ordered 14 families to leave their homes in Tulkarem. 7 additional families were displaced in Ramallah Governor due to settler violence or home demolitions for lacking Israeli issued building permits, which are nearly impossible for Palestinian families to obtain. At the same time, Israeli forces continued preventing about 40,000 previously displaced people from returning to their homes in the refugee camps in Jenin and Tulkarem. Aid groups also lack access to camps, preventing them from properly assessing the damage, structural damage, or the needs of the humans who remain behind. Moving to Sudan, the World Food Programme's country emergency coordinator for Sudan, Samantha Chattaraj, is now back in Port Sudan, having just returned from a mission to Khartoum, where she was able to meet with local authorities to scale up emergency and food and nutrition assistance to 1 million people across the greater Khartoum area in the coming months. Meanwhile, aid deliveries are on their way to Greater Khartoum over the coming weeks, as WFP has pushed to establish a stronger operational footprint that would allow regular deliveries to the capital area. WFP says additional trucks carrying 1,600 metric tons of food and nutrition supplies for 220,000 people have started to arrive in Tawila in North Darfur. Another WFP convoy from Port Sudan is currently on its way to El Fasher, carrying 1,000 metric tons of assistance for about 10,000 people who remain in that besieged city. And just to note that all this represents just a drop in the bucket of what is actually needed. Across Sudan, nearly 25 million men, women, and children, that's half of the population, are facing acute hunger. Nearly 5 million children and breastfeeding mothers are acutely malnourished. Sudan is the only place in the world where famine is currently confirmed. Reports from the ground remain shocking. Around 450,000 people who are already facing famine and enduring horrific levels of violence have been forced to flee from El Fasher to Zamzam camp in just a matter of weeks. Our WFP colleague said the agency was mobilizing assistance to reach people wherever they've fled to across different parts of Darfur and North Darfur State. The food agency also tells us they are setting up mobile warehouses in Tawila to increase storage capacity and pre-stock food ahead of the rainy season, when many roads across the Darfur region become impassable because of flash floods and water. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that hostilities persist in North and South Kivu provinces. In North Kivu, clashes erupted today along the road between Nyabiondo and Kashibere, displacing civilians. Fighting has also been intermittent in the area since 13 April. Meanwhile, in South Kivu, fighting in Kalehe territory this week wounded dozens of civilians and forced more than 15,000 people to flee, with many seeking shelter with host communities. Local health centers face severe shortages of medicine and staff to treat the injured. Humanitarian operations also remain restricted. Yesterday, a humanitarian convoy traveling from Bukavu to the city of Uvira was blocked by armed people, forcing the convoy to stop overnight and have to negotiate access. And in South Sudan, our peacekeeping mission there says they're deeply concerned by reports of clashes between the South Sudan People's Defense Forces and the South Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition in Morobo and Ye counties in central Equatorial State, which have led to civilian displacements and casualties. The mission calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and restoration of calm, given already fragile political and security conditions in the country. And moving to Haiti, where humanitarian colleagues tell us that armed violence continues to displace families and disrupt humanitarian response across multiple departments. According to the International Organization for Migration, nearly 1,000 people have been displaced from the commune of Kenskov in West Department, and that was as of Wednesday, following armed attacks there last week. Half sought shelter with families, while others settled in 3 displacement sites, where IOM reports that food is urgently needed. Meanwhile, 2 other sites in Kenskov that have been hosting 430 people, have been forced to close due to the ongoing violence. In Center Department, UNICEF and its partners have been supporting people who fled attacks by armed groups in Mirbale and Sodo over the last 3 weeks. More than 5,000 people in the town of Inch and the commune of Boucan-Carré have also received critical assistance, including water and hygiene kits. And we've often been telling you about the funding cuts that our humanitarian colleagues are facing. I just want to flag a few examples. In Nigeria, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that funding shortfalls are forcing aid workers to cut back on critical support, including health and nutrition services. Some organizations had to lay off staff and scale back services, including for primary health care and the treatment of severe acute malnutrition. Overall, funding cuts have impacted nearly 70% of health services and 50% of services in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states. OCHA says that as we approach the lean season, it is critical that the international community steps up funding to address the escalating food insecurity. At the start of the year, we and our partners appealed for $910 million to reach 3.6 million people in Nigeria with critical aid and protection. However, given the brutal funding cuts, OCHA has been forced to reprioritize the response, focusing on the most life-saving interventions for the most vulnerable people. To do this, we need $298 million, yet to date we've received only $70 million. And in Burundi, UNHCR says that due to significant funding shortfalls, they and their partners are facing critical limitations on providing protection services. UNHCR is no longer able to distribute dignity kits, leaving nearly 11,000 women and girls without access to basic hygiene items. Support for family tracing has also been severely reduced. UNHCR says it urgently needs $76.5 million to respond to the current crisis there. And in Colombia, refugees there have also been impacted by the cuts. As funding dries up, UNHCR is being forced to suspend essential services, threatening to undo years of progress. In the conflict-ridden Catatumbo region along the border with Venezuela, UNHCR has had to halt the distribution of basic relief items such as mattresses, blankets, hygiene kits, solar lamps, and mosquito nets, even though we see the violence continuing in the area. UNHCR needs $118 million to continue this vital work this year. And just to let you know that Bob Ray, the president of ECOSOC, issued today a, quote, call to action, and that was following the special meeting on forced displacement and refugee protection, which took place yesterday. He called on mobilizing the international community to continue to provide life-saving humanitarian assistance to people who are forcibly displaced while addressing the root causes and advancing durable solutions. Finally, no money, no quiz, but a couple of international days. Today is World Malaria Day. This disease claims one life every minute, mostly in the WHO Africa region. It's time to recommit to ending malaria. We have the knowledge and we have the methods to do so. Also today, when you see a delegate, go out and hug one of your delegates, because today is International Delegates Day. Okay? The day that emphasizes multilateralism in our world. Today is also International Chernobyl Disaster Remembrance Day. This will be the 39th anniversary of the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986. Since then, the United Nations has helped to address the needs of the people in the areas surrounding Chernobyl through emergency humanitarian aid and by supporting recovery and social and economic development. And tomorrow is World Intellectual Property Day that celebrates the contributions made by inventors and creators all over our big blue world. Sir.
Thank you, Steph. With regard to the visit of Syria's Foreign Minister, Mr. Shibani, to the UN and raising the flag and the ceremonies around it, at what level is the UN still engaging with the caretaker Syrian government with regard to the atrocities committed at the coastal centers where the Alawites and ushering a phase of ethnic cleansing and killing over identity? And since the proof of those who committed those atrocities widely was available online, so we haven't heard, other than the statement from the caretaker government in Syria, that they're going to investigate and punish when needed. Well,
I mean,
we haven't heard. What about the UN engagement at this point? Thank you.
There are different mechanisms that are at play, notably the Human Rights Commission that looks at human rights situations in Syria, missing persons. There are a number of mechanisms that are at play. We continue, the relevant people on the UN side continue to interact with the Syrian authorities, the interim authorities, because as in Syria, as in any place else in the world, people who have suffered deserve accountability. Sinan.
Thank you, Steph. I just have a really quick follow-up. Yesterday, you said that after the strike in Ukraine, 175 civilians were killed. So I couldn't find this number anywhere else. I just need to double-check it. You said 175 civilians were killed in Ukraine overnight, day before yesterday.
Yeah, that was we'll check. Those are the numbers we got about that we got from our humanitarian colleagues, but we'll double-check where those came from.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on online?
Right here, Steph. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Mike.
Stripping of immunity that was announced today, or I guess last night, in a court filing by the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, stripping UNRWA of its immunity. I saw the statement that the UN put out earlier, which I'm assuming you're going to read into the record at some point, but I wanted to ask beyond that, what are the immediate ramifications of that for the UN, for its operations, for personnel, Are there any changes that are going to be made in the near term to, I don't, protect yourselves or otherwise insulate yourselves from potential immunity issues?
Decision by court. This was a submission by the U.S. Department of Justice to the court. We've seen that submission. We're going to review it very carefully. But I think it's important for me to restate our very clear position, is that, which has been very long-standing and should be very clear to all, that UNRWA is a subsidiary body of the UN General Assembly, and as such is entitled to the immunity from legal processes under the 1946 Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations. The issue is currently before the Federal District Court in New York, and through our counsel, we'll continue to set out the basis for our position before the court, and we will consider whether any other action is appropriate with respect to the letter.
Thank you, Steph.
Iftikhar.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
Steph, thank you very much. Any update on the situation between India and Pakistan, where the situation is escalating? And does the Secretary General plan to speak to the leaders of India and Pakistan when he returns to New York?
I hope to have something to share with you on that. The latter part. Obviously, we continue to follow the situation with very deep concern. I mean, we of course reiterate our condemnation of the attacks in Jammu and Kashmir, which, as you know, killed about 26 civilian. And we again urge both the governments of India and the government of Pakistan to exercise maximum restraint to ensure the situation does not deteriorate further.
Thank you very much.
Vinny.
You know, two nuclear countries going to war might go to war, may merit such little attention. Anyway, to the question of UNRWA, specifically the filing of the U.S. Government says that UNRWA acts differently than other UN agencies. It has different financing. It has different rules for workers and so on. Anything about that?
Let me just say I don't agree with your comment on your first part, but that's we are paying very close attention to the situation between India and Pakistan. Our position, and I think it's a very clear position, is that UNRWA is a subsidiary body of the General Assembly. It's not a half body, it's not a partial body, it is a full subsidiary body of the General Assembly, and therefore we believe that it is entitled to the protection under the Convention and Privileges and Immunities of for the United Nations. Take out shortly, and we will confirm that, and anybody else who comes, and I wish you all a wonderful, it is Friday? Yes. Sorry, did you have a question, sir? I'm sorry. Sorry, yes. One more question. Go ahead.
This is the 80th anniversary of Russia's war against Nazi Germany in World War II. And
of the war from Russia?
Yeah, I mean World War II, Russia's victory in World War II. And there's going to be a stipulation in Moscow. I wonder if the Secretary General has any plan to attend the stipulations.
No, the Secretary General will not be able to attend those commemorations.
Okay, and This is also the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. But in recent years, there's a growing trend to unilateralism and protectionism. That has weakened the UN-centered international system. So what the developing countries and especially the global south should learn from the past 80 years to respond to this kind of.
Far be it from me to tell countries, whether in the north or in the south, what they should have learned. But I would tell you that I think in this time of crisis where we live, this time of great inequality, this time of great unpredictability that we live, and a time where we all face problems and challenges that do not recognize borders, there's never been a more important time for multilateralism and for global solutions. Thank you all. Now you can have a good weekend. It is Friday, right? Yes. Yes, okay. I need a confirmation.